My dear brothers and sisters, today's experience was sent to us by a brother, a Jewish teacher. He met with Jesus and came back with a shocking truth concerning the Christian faith. Kindly stay to the end to understand his experience. My name is Jeremiah Jacob. I grew up in a home where faith was everything. My family spoke about God as someone close, someone who walked with us in every moment. My grandfather was the first person who showed me what it meant to believe. He would tell me stories of Moses parting the Red Sea and Elijah calling fire from heaven. I listened in wonder, my heart burning with the desire to know more about this great and powerful God. As I grew older, I knew what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to serve God just as my ancestors had done. Studying the Torah became my greatest joy. Every word felt like a treasure, revealing deep truths about life and faith. When I became a rabbi, it felt like stepping into the role I was always meant to play. For many years, I led prayers, taught scripture, and guided people through both their happiest and saddest moments. I stood with families as they welcomed new life and comforted them in times of loss. Each day, I wrapped myself in my prayer shawl and spoke words that connected me to generations of believers before me. Serving God and my community has always been my greatest honor. From the moment I answered God's call, my life has been one of service. Every day, I teach, guide, and support those who seek wisdom and truth. It is not always easy, but it is a great honor to help others grow in their faith and understanding of God's Word. Teaching has always been my greatest joy. Whether speaking to a large gathering or explaining a simple truth to a child, I see each moment as an opportunity to share God's wisdom. I have spent years studying the Scriptures, but I learn just as much from those I teach. Every question, every discussion, and every shared prayer strengthens my faith and reminds me why I chose this path. Being a spiritual leader comes with great responsibility. People look to me for guidance, not just in matters of faith but in life itself. They come with questions about right and wrong, about love and loss, about hope and fear. I do my best to point them toward God, knowing that true answers come from Him alone. It is a humbling role, one that requires patience, kindness, and wisdom beyond my own. Each day is filled with the rituals of faith. I begin my morning in prayer, thanking God for the gift of another day. I read from the holy texts, seeking guidance for myself before I offer it to others. Throughout the day, I lead prayers, study scripture, and counsel those in need. In the evening, I end as I began, with prayer, reflecting on the blessings and lessons of the day. It began with small things, feeling more tired than usual, a lingering ache that wouldn't go away. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Just exhaustion from my duties, a sign to rest more. But as days turned into weeks, I knew something was wrong. When the doctors gave their diagnosis, my world changed in an instant. Their words felt distant, like a voice in a storm. Illness? A serious one? It didn't seem possible. I had spent my life serving God, guiding others in faith. How could this be my path? I wanted to believe it was a mistake, that another test would bring better news. But the truth stood firm. Faith had always been my foundation, but now it felt shaken. I had taught others to trust in God's plan, yet now I wrestled with that trust myself. Why was this happening? Had I failed in some way? Was there something I did not understand? The questions weighed on me, pressing against the faith I had carried for so long. The pain became a constant companion. Some days it was a dull ache. Other days it was sharp, relentless, refusing to let me rest. The treatments were difficult, exhausting my body, testing my spirit. There were moments I wanted to give up, moments when the weight of it all felt too much to bear. But even in the suffering, I knew I had to hold on. I clung to my faith, though at times it felt fragile. I prayed, not always with words, but with my heart, sometimes in hope, sometimes in desperation. I read the Psalms, finding comfort in the cries of David, who also wrestled with fear and pain. If he could question God and still be a man of faith, perhaps I could too. Doubt crept in like a shadow. I wondered why this was happening. Had I not served God faithfully? Had I not given my life to helping others? I asked, but no answer came, only silence. And yet, in that silence, I began to see that faith is not about having every answer. It is about trusting even when there are none. The pain was unlike anything I had ever known. It swallowed me whole, a storm raging inside my body. I could hear voices, some near, some distant, but their words blurred together. My breathing grew shallow. My strength was slipping away. I wanted to fight, to hold on. But something within me whispered, "It's time." A deep peace settled over me, and in that moment, I let go. Then, suddenly, I was no longer in my body. I could see myself lying there, motionless. I could see the doctors moving quickly, their faces tense. My family stood nearby, their eyes filled with fear, their hands clasped in silent prayer. I wanted to reach out to them, to tell them I was still here, that I could see them, that I loved them. But they could not hear me. They could not see me. Tears streamed down my wife's face as she clutched my hand, whispering my name. My children stood close, their faces pale with grief. It hurt to watch them in pain, to see the sorrow I was leaving behind. And yet I felt no fear. There was a warmth surrounding me, a light that called to me. I was no longer bound by sickness, no longer weighed down by suffering. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole. The world I had known was slipping away, but I was not afraid. Because in that moment I knew I was going home. I felt a gentle pull, as if something unseen was guiding me forward. The world I had known, the hospital room, my grieving family, the pain began to fade. Before me stretched a light so pure, so warm, that I could not look away. It was not harsh or blinding. It welcomed me, wrapping around me like a loving embrace. For the first time in so long, I felt no pain, no weakness, no sorrow, only peace. A peace so deep that it filled every part of me. It was as if I had been carrying a great weight all my life, and now it had been lifted. Then images began to appear before me, not as memories, but as living moments. I saw my childhood, the first time I had prayed with true faith. I saw my parents teaching me about God, their voices filled with love. I saw the day I became a rabbi, my heart bursting with purpose. But I also saw the times I had failed, moments when I had let anger or pride take hold, times when I had turned away from someone in need. And yet, there was no judgment, only understanding, only truth. Every moment of my life was laid bare before me, not to shame me, but to teach me. To show me how each choice, each word, each act of love or neglect had shaped my journey. I understood now, more clearly than ever, that life was never just about what we built, but about how we loved, how we forgave, how we served. Tears filled my eyes, not from regret, but from awe. I was seeing my life through the eyes of the divine, and in that vision I understood nothing had been wasted. Even my struggles had led me here. Even my pain had been part of something greater. Just as I felt ready to embrace the light, everything changed. The warmth around me faded, replaced by a chilling stillness. The brilliant glow dimmed, and before I could understand what was happening, I was falling, drawn into a vast and endless darkness. I tried to call out, but no sound came. The silence was thick, pressing against me like an unseen force. Then, from the shadows, I began to see them, figures moving, restless, weighed down by sorrow beyond words. Their faces were twisted in agony, not from fire or chains, but from something deeper: regret, despair, an emptiness that could not be filled. I did not know where I was, but I could feel it, a place of separation, of loss. These souls had once been full of life, of dreams, of choices, just like me. But now, they wandered in a realm without hope. A voice, neither harsh nor cruel, but firm and unshaken, echoed around me. "Do you understand?" I wanted to say no, that I didn't. But I did. In this place, there were no lies, no excuses. These were souls who had turned away from love, from truth, from grace. They had chosen self above all else, and now they remained in that choice. I felt a deep sorrow, not just for them, but for myself. Had I ever turned away from truth? Had I ever hardened my heart when I should have shown mercy? A fear I had never known gripped me. What if this was my judgment? What if I had misunderstood everything? Fate my life teaching, preaching, and guiding others in faith. I had read the scriptures, studied the law, and led countless prayers. But in this moment, standing in the unknown, all those words felt distant. I tried to respond, but nothing came. Not because I didn't believe, but because belief felt so small compared to what I was facing. Did I truly know him? Or had I only spoken of him without ever standing in his presence? Doubt crept in. Had my faith been built on knowledge alone? On rituals and traditions? If I knew God, why did I feel so lost? Then, in the silence, something stirred within me. A memory, not of books or teachings, but of moments. The time I held a grieving child's hand. The prayers whispered in the stillness of night. The kindness of a stranger. The peace that had carried me even when I didn't understand. Faith was not just knowing about God. Faith was trusting him even when I had no answers. And so, with all the strength I had left, I whispered, not with certainty, but with surrender, "You are." The darkness did not vanish, but something shifted. I was not alone. I had never been alone. The darkness gave way to light, soft at first, then brilliant beyond anything I had ever seen. Before me, scenes unfolded like living stories, more vivid than any words on a scroll. I saw Abraham standing beneath the stars, his face lifted in awe as God promised him descendants as numerous as the heavens. I saw Moses trembling before the burning bush, his sandals cast aside on holy ground. The prophets appeared, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Elijah, each carrying the weight of divine words, calling people to repentance, to faith, to hope. Then the vision shifted. A man appeared, one I did not recognize, yet I could not look away. His presence was unlike anything I had known. There was no crown upon his head, no royal robes, yet he carried an authority that kings could only dream of. His voice, though gentle, seemed to shake the very fabric of existence. He walked among the poor, the sick, the forgotten. With a touch, the blind could see. With a word, the dead rose. A woman reached for the hem of his garment, and her pain vanished. A storm raged, and with a command, it was silenced. And then I saw him upon a cross. Blood stained the wood, and yet, even in suffering, his eyes held something I could not comprehend. A forgiveness that defied reason. Tears filled my eyes. This was no ordinary man. This was power, yet clothed in humility. This was holiness, yet reaching out to sinners. This was a mystery I had never dared to understand. Who was he? Could it be? As I stood there, caught between the visions of past and future, something even more profound happened. The light around me grew even more intense, and from within it, a voice rang out, calm yet all-encompassing. I am the way, the truth, and the life. The words hit me like a flood, washing over me, piercing deep into my soul. I had spent my life teaching about the path of faith, the commandments of God, and the righteousness of His people, but now these words, simple yet overwhelming, shook me to my core. I am the way, he said. The way to what? To salvation? To understanding? To God Himself? The truth, he continued. The truth I had sought my whole life. The truth that had eluded me in my studies, in my sermons, and in my prayers. Was this the truth, standing right before me? And the life? Life, in its fullness, beyond the rituals and laws. Life, eternal and unending. Could this be the same life that I had taught about, or was it something entirely new? The light grew brighter, and everything around me began to merge. The stories of Moses, Abraham, the commandments I had held dear, and now the life of Jesus, it all began to weave together. The law and the grace, the prophets and the Messiah, the Old and New Testament, two separate worlds, but now one in the same divine truth. My heart trembled. How could this be? In that moment, I was confronted with a truth I could not ignore. Jesus was not a figure from another tradition or a distant teacher. He was the fulfillment of everything I had known, the answer to every question I had asked. He was God walking among us. As the light enveloped me, everything changed. The overwhelming presence of peace and warmth surrounded me, but it wasn't just the light itself, it was the figure within it. He stood there, not with power or judgment, but with compassion that radiated from him like nothing I had ever known. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw a depth of love that was beyond my understanding. It was as if he could see into the very depths of my soul, knowing every question, every doubt, every moment of confusion. He asked me this question: "Have you truly found me?" The question struck me to my core. It wasn't just a question about my knowledge or my teachings, but about my heart, my true understanding. All these years of study, all these years of serving God, had I really found Him? I had spent my life searching for meaning in the scriptures, in the rituals, in the prayers. But now, standing before Him, I realized how much I had taken for granted, how much I had missed in my pursuit of certainty. My heart was heavy, and yet there was no condemnation in His gaze, only an invitation to something deeper, more real. In that moment, everything shifted. The years of faith, the struggles, the teachings, all came together in a way I had never understood before. I saw beyond the words and the rituals. I saw him, not as a distant figure, but as the living, breathing presence of God. And with that realization came a profound transformation, as though the very foundation of my soul had been shaken and remade in that single moment. The moment I stood before Jesus, everything I thought I knew about God and faith began to unravel. All the teachings I had followed, all the doctrines I had lived by, suddenly seemed incomplete, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit. It wasn't that they were wrong, but rather, they were incomplete, only one side of a much larger truth. As Jesus looked at me with such compassion, I realized that faith was not just about rules or the correct understanding of ancient texts. It was about a relationship, a deep, personal connection with God that transcended all the boundaries I had created through my own interpretation. The theological walls I had spent my life building began to crumble. I had always thought of God in terms of what I could understand, what I could define through the lens of human knowledge. But standing there, I felt a truth that went beyond reason, beyond my own small comprehension. God's truth wasn't something to be confined by human understanding. It was a living, breathing force that could not be boxed in. This realization began to shift my perspective. What I had once seen as rigid boundaries, between Old and New Testament, between the law and grace, between my understanding of God and the mysteries of the divine, suddenly melted away. The truth was far greater than I had ever imagined. God's truth, I realized, was not just found in laws, in history, or in rituals. It was found in love, in grace, in the person of Jesus Christ. It was not about how much knowledge I could accumulate, but about how much I was willing to surrender to the love that was freely offered to me. I understood then that God had never been distant. He had always been near, always ready to meet us in the most personal way, through Jesus, who was not just a teacher, but the very embodiment of God's love and truth. As I stood there, looking at Jesus, I understood something profound. God's truth is not static, nor is it confined to the written word. It is living, active, and present in every moment. It is a truth that calls us into relationship, not into mere intellectual agreement. This encounter marked the beginning of a deeper spiritual journey for me. I knew that everything I had believed, everything I had taught, had to be reshaped. The theological foundations that I had built my life on were still important, but they were no longer enough. I had been given the gift of a new way to see, a new way to know God, not through doctrine alone, but through the experience of His love and presence in my life.
I have watched all of your videos and feel comfortable enough with you telling the world my story. I know some of your viewers will ask why I won't tell my story personally. The last time I did, I ended up involuntarily committed to a local psychiatric unit. People immediately think that you're crazy if you mention dying and seeing the future. I know that you will be narrating this experience, and while you do have my full permission to do so, please do not use my full name or any other information that can identify me. I can't be locked up again because of intolerant people who believe that I am demonic. I am a psychic, not demonic. I didn't get my powers from Satan, I got them from Jesus. It wasn't always like this, though. Once you have read this email, you will wish to ask further questions. I do not mind, so send them away. I know that your viewers want me to get right into my NDE, but it isn't as simple as that. I'm not going to tell you my whole life story, however, getting to the NDE will take a little bit more time. I'm not going to sit here and lie to anyone. My ex-husband wasn't exactly father or husband of the year, but I thought deep down if I loved him enough, he would change. It seemed that the more I loved him, though, the more he changed for the worse. My husband stayed at home with the kids while I went to work. It had been this way since 1997 when he lost his job at the shipyard after a pretty serious accident caused by him. Because he loved the drink a little too much, he ended up costing the company he worked for a couple of million in equipment losses and a couple of $100,000 in settlements to the workers he permanently injured. As I said, he messed up. I had been working my way up in a company that I still work for today, and by the time he had been fired, I was the breadwinner anyway. When we got married, we decided to have 2 kids. Luckily for us, the first time was a charm, and we ended up with fraternal twins, 1 boy and 1 girl. They were born in October of 1995. Anyway, he lost his job as a crane operator in 1997, so we decided it would be a good idea for him to stay home with the kids while I worked. I wish I had known then what I know now because I would have kept taking them to daycare. My babies would probably still be alive today if I had. For a few months after we started doing things this way, everything seemed fine. He stopped drinking, and things seemed okay. Fast forward to the beginning of the year 1998. I came home from work. He was on the couch watching the TV, and the kids were down for their afternoon naps. I asked how his day went, and he said fine. I went to check on the kids. They were sound asleep in their beds, so I went back into the living room to talk to him. I asked him what was for dinner, and he backhanded me. I should have known then and there to leave, but I was stupid. Of course, he apologized for it and said he thought I was disrespecting him because I was working and he wasn't. It started to become more and more of an occurrence. Usually, it was only once a month, and then it became more and more regular until he started drinking again and doing it nightly. It got so bad that I began to run out of excuses for my boss on why I wasn't at work or why I had caked-up makeup on. I know what everyone seems to be thinking: why wouldn't you just leave the piece of trash? It's easier said than done, especially when you think you're in love. There's not a day that goes by that I don't wish I had left sooner. August 16, 2005. I decided to get off work early. I had been working quite a bit to finish a project that needed to be done and had finished it earlier than expected. So, I told my boss that I was taking off and headed home to surprise my husband. I walked into my house and noticed the trash that I called my husband was not in his usual spot, drinking on the couch. So, I made my way down the hall and heard whimpering from my daughter's room. I will not describe what I saw him doing, but I imagine you already know. I ran to the bedroom, grabbed the pistol we kept in our safe, and put it to his head. I wish to God I had pulled the trigger. I didn't, and it cost me everything. A year later, the divorce went through fairly quickly. It turns out that he had been taking turns with both of our children for the better part of 3 years. I had no idea. With charges pending and him in jail, I figured everything would be fine for me and the kids. It wasn't. The night my children and I died, we were coming home from therapy. As soon as we walked in the door, I saw a flash and felt a burning sensation in my chest. I immediately fell to my knees and on my face. He shot me 5 more times, each time missing vital organs by mere centimeters. My children weren't as lucky. I watched as he shot my daughter first and then my son. Slowly breathing my last breath, I heard him mutter something along the lines of, "Now we will all die." I watched him take his own life and took my final breath. I remember standing up and looking around, looking at my son, my daughter, and my body and feeling nothing. I don't know why I felt nothing for them. I just didn't at that time. What I did feel was this strange tugging sensation around my belly button area. It's hard to describe, but if you think about it in human terms, the tugging sensation felt like a cat or kitten tugging at your shoelace or a piece of string that you were holding. When I looked down, I saw what appeared to be a string attached to me. The tugging sensation continued. First, it was a light tug, and then it got stronger and stronger. It felt like I was being pulled towards something, but I was being pulled on ice, so my body just moved along without friction. I can't even begin to tell you how long it took for the tugging to stop. The tunnel was what I would describe as true black. No light was allowed in, except for the light that I was being pulled towards. Some of the images I saw in the darkness, though, were horrendous: Hitler's speech, muggings, 9/11, and others. Finally, after what seemed like days, maybe even weeks or months, I arrived at the light, and with a popping-like sound, I was through. What I saw and felt here was some of the greatest love and joy that I had ever felt. I felt as if I were a baby in my daddy's arms again. Looking around, I saw a dark-skinned man with a beard. He was wearing a toga robe and had on sandals. When you're in heaven, you immediately know what Jesus Christ looks like. As I made my way over to where he was, I could see that multiple people surrounded him. I could feel the love pouring out of him for all of us. So I started to walk away. As I was walking away, I heard Jesus say in my mind, "My daughter, where are you going?" I thought back, "I am not worthy to be in your presence." His words stunned me. My daughter, everyone who believes in me is worthy to be in my presence. I turned and saw that Jesus was now beside me. "Walk with me, my daughter," he said. As we walked, Jesus told me my purpose and why I was there. It was here that I realized I wasn't dreaming, I was dead. "My kids," I said, looking at Jesus. His expression told me they were gone. "Why? Why did you give them to me only to take them away?" I asked. "That is what they wanted. They chose this ending for themselves." "Wait, what do you mean they chose this?"